Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Strategy Series. We're all about education and empowerment. The firm puts it on. We're called Gerhardt Law, an IP boutique in New Jersey, New York, and Philly. But really, this is our way of kind of giving back to entrepreneurs and educating them and empowering them on their journey. I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves. First, we have Yitzi Hammer.
I'm gonna try and keep it short. If you want me to embellish more, you let me know.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, my name is Yitzi Hammer. I grew up in the States. I've been living in Israel since 2000, so almost 25 years. I am married with 4 kids. I'm a lawyer and also a podcast host. I host a podcast called Beyond the Code, which focuses on the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding emerging tech. I've been a high-tech lawyer for the last 10 years. Before that, I did some high-tech consulting. And 3 years ago, started a practice called DLT Law, which focuses exclusively on the blockchain and crypto sector. So do a lot of regulatory compliance and legal work centered around that. And we'll discuss a little bit later, like what that even means to be a crypto lawyer and why you need a lawyer to just do crypto and what value me as an Israeli lawyer could give you in talking about crypto. The answer is a whole lot because both of Israel and because of what crypto is. But again, we'll get into that. I don't want to drag on too much. I'm also an operational legal advisor to the IDF in a reserve duty capacity, and I've been doing that for the last 11 months simultaneously with my job. So I spend about 50% of the week, including weekends, advising on operational legal issues, and that's it, I think.
That's good. That's good for now. Thank you. I appreciate that. Our second speaker is Franklin Graves. I've known him for a while. I think I might have met you as a law student. I was just telling someone the other day. But super excited that you're on the panel.
Yeah, so I'll take it in reverse. I'm most excited just to have a conversation, kind of see where we go with the questions and the discussion. This is such an exciting topic. So that's what I hope to get out of it. So yeah, I'm Franklin. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I currently work as my full-time gig is as a senior technology attorney for HCA Healthcare, which is a large healthcare company here in the US. And before that, I was with Eventbrite. I was with the online ticketing platform, pre-IPO and post-IPO with them. So went through that process. And then before that, right out of law school, I started out at a record label, Naxos classical music record label, based out of Hong Kong, but global presence around the world. I have been on Yitzi's podcast as a guest, and I enjoyed my time there. Again, I love these discussions, and that his podcast is a great way to listen into the discussions like we're going to have here. But yeah, we go back to when I was in law school, David. That's right. It was 2013, maybe 2012. No, 2013, I think is when it was. So over a decade now, which is just insane to think about. But so I'm here in my personal capacity. I'm not representing my company, not speaking on behalf of them. So all the kind of fun disclaimers there, and it's not legal advice. But also on the side, I have a fun side gig that I do where it's I explore the creator economy. So I just went to the White House last week, and then before that, I was in Berkeley presenting a paper that I've written on creator economy law, what it is, and how AI and blockchain and all that Web3 technologies impact it as well.
And you have a newsletter.
And I
Yes.
have a newsletter. Yeah.
I was actually just gonna say that too, Yitzi. I said everybody
An
check out his
awesome
newsletter.
newsletter.
Yeah. So check it out. Go to LinkedIn, sign up. It will be good. I'm sorry, I didn't realize there were people in the waiting room. I just let them in. I usually have an assistant with me, and she's not here today, so I'm sorry about that. Just to let you, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm an intellectual property attorney, a patent attorney, a partner at Gerhardt Law. Just please enjoy. I just really want to get into it. So Yitzi, blockchain, crypto, everybody's throwing out these words. Like, I think there are people who clearly are in the know, people who know what those concepts are and what they and kind of what they mean. But there are plenty of people I know just from their introductions that don't. maybe you can give a kind of, doesn't have to be brief, just an introduction to what blockchain is, what's the relation to crypto, things like that.
Absolutely. In the introductions, a lot of people mentioned that they came here to like find out what crypto is. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I know probably most of what there is to know about it, but I don't think that in our call or even like a 10-hour call will be sufficient for me to tell you what crypto is. So I'm not even going to try. Um, I'll start by saying why I think I'm an interesting person to talk to vis-a-vis crypto. Um, so Israel is a unique country in that we don't export all that much, but we export a hell of a lot of tech. We're called the startup nation, the innovation hub of the Middle East, and working in the largest law firm in Israel in its tech department, I got to see, I guess like some of the biggest deals, multi-billion-dollar deals, tech deals, across the board, all different kinds of techs. And in high tech you have all these different kind of trends of like well tech and fintech and femtech, and some of them are just trends and some of them are really here to stay. And blockchain, I started working on blockchain in like 2016. And at the beginning, at first there was just Bitcoin. That was the first cryptocurrency. It was launched in 2009. And then slowly other cryptos came onto the market, and drawing from Bitcoin's blockchain technology, technology continued to evolve more, and crypto became a whole lot more than just Bitcoin. And when it did, people started to use it as a vehicle for raising funds, for um, uh, a blockchain is my practice is called DLT law. It's distributed ledger technology. It's the underlying technology of blockchain, and it's actually a fantastic use case for a lot of things. So both on the tokenizing side, where people launch tokens and use them to fundraise and to create microeconomies where the token has all different kinds of utilities, to just using blockchain for other reasons. And so in 2016, there was like what's called an ICO bubble or boom. ICO is an initial coin offering or initial token offering, similar to IPO, where a company goes public. Here, tokens are launched to the public, and anybody can come and buy them. And it was initially a very quick and easy way to raise money. And given the lack of clarity around securities laws. I mean, there's still a lack of clarity, but in 2016 it was even more so. These ICOs weren't required to put out the same disclosures that a company that's IPOing on, the Nasdaq or another regulated securities exchange are required to, and they basically just launched and raised tens of millions of dollars without any kind of representations. And it was a whole lot of fun, at least from a legal perspective, just doing ICO after ICO after ICO. And a lot of them either had some kind of Israeli nexus or came out of Israel, and it was an opportunity to really learn a lot about an industry. And in the traditional tech sector, when you're looking to see what legal frameworks apply to your business, typically the most common way of doing that, especially around privacy, which we're going to talk about in a second, is to look where the servers are. And then wherever the servers are that are the driving force behind this tech would determine a big part of what regulatory frameworks apply to that company or whatever. And in blockchain works very different in that there are no servers. It's a distributed ledger, and the way that it works is that you have all different kind of nodes. Anybody who's connected to the blockchain is sort of like a point that feeds into the blockchain, and then everybody, when a transaction is performed and it draws and various miners from all over the world come in to validate the transaction, they provide the computing power to allow that to happen. So there isn't one place that you could pinpoint and say, okay, this is where the servers are, this is the jurisdiction. You're really subject to multiple regulatory frameworks, and that's kind of what makes it a very interesting, but also a very complex product from a regulatory perspective. But again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. I feel like that was a good introduction. Let me know what you folks think. Do you want me to keep going? I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good introduction. I think there's probably probably a bunch of questions though, that we'll have, that I think we'll have, um, especially as it relates to kind of intellectual property, the regulation, the ethics, but we'll come back to that in a second. Let's go to Franklin, since you introduced the concept of data privacy. Again, hard to talk about blockchain without talking about data. And so, Franklin, maybe you just want to give us a kind of a kind of short, it doesn't have to be short, kind of synopsis about some of the data privacy issues relating to these blockchain slash crypto slash technology structures, if you will.
Sorry,
Right,
Franklin, before
yeah,
you
so
start, I just want
go
to say,
ahead.
like, I know that I dropped like a whole bunch of like bombs there. I opened up like all these little things and then kind of just left them open. So I apologize for that. It just it is an entire world, and you know, as I'm sure you know, Franklin knows. So hopefully there'll be other questions and other opportunities to embellish on them. But go ahead, Franklin.
There will,
Sorry.
there will.
Yeah, so I'm coming at it not from the crypto side. So my most of my involvement in blockchain technologies are from more of a corporate use, like enterprise type use. And I think we've seen a lot of this popping up. Even just I think yesterday there was the announcement from Andreessen Horowitz, the A16Z side of their A16Z crypto side of their company, investing in a thing called Story Protocol, and the ability of what Yitzi was just describing, which is the distributed ledger technology, really unlocking the ability to democratize access to information, access to ledgers, and verification systems. And so, coupled with that, as we've seen, especially with the rise of NFTs and that whole market as well, the ability to include off-chain kind of automations, whether it's contractual, licensing, all that kind of fun stuff for royalty accounting. That's really kind of what Story Protocol is getting at and is developing. And there are many others, even in the music space specifically too, around royalties and like name, image, likeness rights are getting captured in that way, so that in a ever increasingly digital world where things can be copy pasted and utilized in different ways, being able to point back to or integrate with a decentralized system that is open access and ability to gather information and verify credentials or records or licenses and items like that, it really starts to make your mind spin to think through all the different possibilities that can be unlocked by that. Because like I mentioned during our networking session, I came from the music industry, and there were a lot of issues with royalty accounting and black boxes of artists not being able to be found, or songwriters not being able to be found, or streams not linked to the publishing, and all of that. So there's a lot that this type of technology can unlock, both on the IP rights management side and related rights. Going back to more enterprise uses, though, I think if you think about it, the best way to describe it is if you're a licensed professional, whether you're a medical professional or a legal professional or some other type of professional that has to get a license, the ability to put that information on a blockchain run network is unlocking a lot. Instead of one centralized agency being the source of truth, they can then tap into a distributed ledger technology of some type to store store the verifications for those credentials, and make that more easily accessible and verifiable. And so you think about it from the hiring perspective too. There are startups that are offering ledger technology that empowers background checks. So from a privacy perspective, what this does is it puts the control back into me as an applicant or me as a data subject, depending on how you view it and where you are in the world. And it gives you the power to control where your data goes, as opposed to some third party, as you was describing, some third party holding it on a server somewhere and then passing it around or hosting on your behalf. You're then control through a wallet of some kind. And so when you go to apply for a job and they want to verify your previous employers, you have all that information stored in your wallet. And then the blockchain has the cryptographic hashes that can serve as a verification that those are actually valid data points that are not stored in the blockchain from a privacy perspective, but remain with you, the individual, and you can transfer them to the person that you're applying to and give them a limited scope, limited term access to that information. So for example, when you apply and you scan, it'll say they're going to hold on to that information for 30 days as they evaluate your application. And that is something you can grant access to. And then it's all automated. It takes away some of these concerns around like how long are they storing the data, how long do they need to keep it, where is it going to be stored, where's it going, and it provides visibility, but all powered by a decentralized system. So from my perspective, a lot of privacy issues and concerns, both from a consumer perspective and from a corporate perspective, of the liabilities that come with holding on to that and transferring that, get solved or can be more readily, like the risk can be decreased through these types of technologies.
So Franklin, are you
Can I just
suggesting, I'm just curious, Yeti, I just want to ask a quick question. So are you suggesting a world where most businesses that are handling data, whether that's personal identifiable information or, credit card information, I mean, we're all about data. So are you suggesting that we are getting to a world where it probably would be better economically, socially, culturally to kind of be on the blockchain, kind of not have to deal with like terms and conditions and privacy policies and stuff like that, and kind of be kind of move your business to the blockchain? Is that kind of what you think should happen and could happen?
I think in a lot of use cases, it does open up a lot of possibilities to decrease the friction that comes from not having a decentralized ledger of any kind. And so I think also, I already said like one of my main points, which is the ledger itself, the blockchain itself, the way that it can be designed is that they don't actually store the data. So that's the other important thing there. So that alleviates a lot of concerns from a regulatory perspective, from whether around the globe, depending on which regulation you're talking about, from a consumer privacy perspective. Right. But also coupled with that is the ability to audit it and also have closed blockchain networks. So there's this concept of the crypto world where you have open networks, publicly accessible data ledgers, all that kind of publicly accessible ledgers to see when, like we saw when the breaches happen, if some major corporation pays millions of dollars to hackers, we typically can find that out and trace the money and all that. There are closed deployments of blockchain technologies between trusted individuals. As you so beautifully described, the different nodes are operated by a select few of people and corporations that have come together to form a network, and that can be privatized in that way, but still public in the sense and open in the sense where anyone that's a member and is doing business on that network has visibility into the transactions that are happening and things like that. So there's a lot. I think if you want to expand that into maybe driver's license and other things like that, yes, I think there is potentially a world in which blockchain-like technology or blockchain technology itself of some kind is going to unlock that freedom and flexibility to have more control as a consumer. But also, if you think about like when I work in the data world, it's always talking about how can you decrease the amount of time that you need to store the information and hold on to it. There are regulatory requirements sometimes that you have to keep records and hold on to it for 7 years or however many years. But outside of that, if you don't have to keep and hold on to the data, but you have a ledger that shows it was accessed these dates and times, and that's sufficient. You don't have to keep the data itself. That's a way to decrease your risk profile.
Okay, can I just step in
Yes,
for a
please.
minute? I don't know if you saw me shaking my head vigorously when you were advocating for going fully blockchain from a privacy perspective. Anyways, I just have a different approach to it. So I mentioned that I do a lot of regulatory compliance work. Crypto is people always say there's no regulation in crypto. It's actually the opposite. There's a ton of regulation in crypto. It's just that the vast majority of it is not dedicated to crypto. It's existing regulatory regimes that people aren't sure how to apply to crypto. So you have AML and banking and existing financial regulation and securities laws, et cetera, et cetera. And there's like a process in how you adapt those to be cohesive with these new technologies. But one of the in my one of the hats I used to wear was I was a privacy lawyer myself. I did unfortunately a lot of privacy work from 6 months before the GDPR was released, when it started to become a thing, until I started this practice. And there was not any commercial agreement that didn't require a deep knowledge and understanding of data privacy. Because initially, when data privacy started to become a thing in 2018, we had in our firm, and it's a very large firm, we had a data privacy department. And then whenever any agreement that came in that had some kind of privacy aspect, we would send it over to the privacy guys. But it got to such a point where every commercial agreement had a DPA attached to it, and it had a extensive privacy section, and those sections just got longer and longer. It became impossible to be any kind of commercial lawyer if you weren't also a privacy lawyer. So I did, the CIPP, which is like one of the IAP's standard privacy law courses, and started doing a lot of privacy work. And then when I, went over all in on crypto, I was really surprised to see how this conversation with entrepreneurs around privacy, which is always like a huge thing when any startup launches their product, trying to understand like where privacy and data protection fit into it. Those conversations weren't happening, and it wasn't even a micro feature within their product or a consideration at all. They were all talking about regulation, but not the regulations that I was used to. They weren't concerned with GDPR or CIPP or other privacy regimes. And I wondered on this, and what I learned is a few things. Number one, in the vast majority of cases, when you're interacting with a blockchain protocol, you're not actually sharing any of your personal data. And so I don't know, 9 out of 10, but in like 7 out of 10 cases, you wouldn't even need a privacy policy. You wouldn't even be subject to the privacy regimes that you normally would be. And that's because very often all you have is a string of numbers and letters that are representative of a private or public key, of a public key rather. And that's not personal data. It's as if you only had IP addresses, which in and of themselves are not personal data, only when coupled with something else. So that was the first interesting thing to note. Another thing that I noted was how the actual technology itself is not set up to be compliant with data privacy requirements, specifically vis-a-vis retention, or what's sometimes referred to as the right to be forgotten, right? If you collect personal data of mine, I have the right to ask you to delete it, right? If anybody's ever had the opportunity to delete their Facebook profile, as I did many years ago, you could literally delete all of your information. They give you a hard time about it, and they ask you, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" But eventually, they delete all your data. One feature of blockchain is that the transactions are immutable in that, like, you can't call customer service and ask them, could you just undo that transaction? You just say my money back. No, once the transaction's performed, you can't undo it. And if you're writing a smart contract and you're putting into the smart contract, if A does B, then C should happen, then if A does B, then C is going to happen. You can't say like, oh no, I want to delete A or delete B. So that becomes an issue when A and B are referring to the storage of personal data. Because once the smart contract has been deployed, unless you leave like certain backdoors open, which often leaving those backdoors open in and of themselves might be a violation of other laws, then you can't ever delete the data. So it's just not, the technology isn't built for existing privacy regimes. At least that's how it is to date. The cool thing
So
about these
real fast,
technologies is that they're
I think
constantly
one thing
evolving.
real
And
fast
Mhm.
though, to chime in real fast, I think if in the
Please.
crypto space specifically, when you're transferring assets, whether it's fiat currency or whatever, to obtain some type of crypto, there are the KYC know your customer laws, and that's where you typically would have an intermediary of a bank of some kind or some type of financial institution that has to verify your identity. I know when I bought crypto, you have to like do a photo, screenshot of
Mhm.
a photo of your driver's license, stuff like that. So I think that there is an entry point in, but that still is disconnected from what's actually stored on the blockchain network and in those
100%.
records. And then the
100.
smart contracting and all that is also happening off the blockchain too. And so I think that there's some element there, depending on how the technology is implemented. So I agree with what you're saying. I think it's also just highlighting and reinforcing the fact that there are these ancillary kind of touch points where a person is really synonymous, where they could be uncovered as opposed to truly anonymous in a lot of different cases. So yeah, I
No, no,
just want to add that into what you're saying.
I totally agree. Whatever's off chain is, I mean, like if you're coming on chain and you're going through off chain steps where you're giving your data, then it's not just the wallet address anymore. It's a wallet address associated with a certain identifying detail, and then it is personal data because you have those two data points that are connected, and that and you're de-anonymizing essentially. But you actually touched on another point, which is the last point I wanted to get to, which is KYC and AML laws. As regulators come in and they want to have regulatory oversight to this like wild west of crypto where people are anonymous and doing these huge financial transactions and nobody knows who they are, and so there's more and more requirements for KYC. And depending on the product or the industry, not all entrepreneurs feel comfortable KYCing their customers. They sometimes lose their customers if they have to KYC them, because the whole point of them coming to their platform to begin with was the anonymity aspect. And so actually there's a really cool blockchain feature called zero knowledge proofs, which using ZK proofs, you could have a smart contract say, okay, the smart contract, do the KYC. And if the KYC was performed and this person, provided his driver's license and is a legit person and everything, so then you tick off a box. But I, as the owner of the platform or the platform operator, will never have access to your personal data. And so it gives a certain degree of comfort to the other side. From a regulatory perspective, it's not exactly what the regulator wants, but it's a lot closer to what they're asking for. So it mitigates risk to a certain extent. And it makes for a really interesting topic from a privacy perspective, because if you as the processor don't actually have access to the information, it stays within the smart contract. Are you still required to uphold the same requirements that you would have to traditionally? I don't know. It's still too early to tell, but I think it's a fun question. Maybe we could have a special podcast episode to discuss.
Well, actually, Yitzi, so I think we kind of been dancing around this like wild, wild west. There are crypto laws, there are know your customer laws. What's the deal? I am a business and I want to get involved in blockchain. I want to use blockchain. I want to become part of the use case. What am I doing? What am I adhering to? What am I, am I contacting you? Am I contacting Franklin? Am like I have to I don't want to be, I don't want to get in trouble. It is the wild, wild west. And so, things may not be illegal, they could be unethical, they might not be regulated. Like I don't even know where to go. What do I do?
Sure.
What's the first steps and what do I look out for?
Yeah. So I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like the first the first reaction that most people have when they come into this industry is they talk to people and people are like, "Whoa, you can get screwed by the SEC, you can get this, you can get that." Like people, there's a lot of questions. People don't know. The unfortunately, the regulators, specifically in the U.S., haven't given clear-cut guidelines as to how you need to behave if you may or may not be a security. What even it's not clear what you need to do, and so um, typically customers come to us. We have customers from all across the globe. I mean, we're based in Israel, but we're by no means an Israeli firm in that sense. And they say, okay, I'm building this product in the blockchain world. I want to be regulatory compliant. What do I have to do? And so the first thing is to understand what your product is, who your team consists of, right? Where you are, and what kind of users you want to cater to, because those three things will determine where and how you want to set up the corporate structure, and the way you set up your corporate structure will basically determine which regulatory frameworks you are susceptible to. So. And the first thing you have to choose is like which route you want to go down. There's basically two routes. Um, the first route is to be, a fully regulated company. What does that mean? You want to, get a certificate of approval by regulators saying, we viewed your product and we viewed your flow, and everything that you're doing is kosher. And so here, take this, fancy license. You could frame it and put it on the wall, and you could tell everybody we are a licensed. I mean, whatever it is that you are, depending again on what your product is. Um, that's that's route number one. That's typically expensive route, and also will limit you in to a certain extent, because that will mean that you could operate in A, B, and C where you have that regulatory approval. The second and more common feature I've found is what we call regulatory arbitrage of sorts. Okay, where you say, okay, I do not want to get regulated, maybe because you can't, because your product is is not able to obtain a license because of its features. Um, and then we'll sit with you and your product team, and we'll tell you what you can and can't do. And then, assuming that you don't do those certain things, then you could be active everywhere except A, B, and C. Okay, where you're required to have a license and you don't have one. And again, that's a more common feature. Given the United States regulators lack of direction
And can
over
I
the
ask real
past
fast,
years.
do
Sure.
you run into issues with the app marketplaces? So Apple's App Store
Excellent
and
question.
Google's Android Store. Yeah, tossing that one over to you.
It's an excellent question. We absolutely do run into issues. Again, depending on what you're building and who you're building with, there are successes. Usually, if we're talking about a blockchain protocol, then they want to launch their own unique wallet, and they want to be listed on the various app stores. The Apple Store is much more difficult to work with, but we've had successes. Again, we're talking about legitimate companies. Nobody's doing anything wrong. It's just that the risk appetite of Apple's risk appetite is such that they want to make sure that you have certain things that make them feel comfortable. And so sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not. It really depends again on the product. But not having a license doesn't mean that you're a criminal. It just means that you don't have a license and you can't operate in such and such place. So like I said, like the United States, um, even not even many, or if not most, entrepreneurs who are building crypto products out of the United States are looking to set up structures abroad and to do all their operations abroad, and to even IP block US consumers because of the difficulty that they've run in with operating their platforms within the US.
Yeah, that's a really good point to stress. the fact that something's not, regulated doesn't mean it's illegal, right? And so that, I think that's important,
Again, unless you're operating in a place that you're required to have a license and you don't have
Sure.
one.
Yes.
Um,
Okay, well, Franklin, I'm just curious just from your kind of overall perspective, what about the ethics of this? Do you think that, kind of the ethics of doing business or the ethics of, who you are as a company or, your corporate social responsibility? What's your take on, blockchain, crypto, data in general and kind of being and kind of throwing ethics into it?
Yeah. So ESG type, sustainability, all of that, and even ethical considerations are a huge aspect of the analysis that goes into any type of commitment that a company or that individuals are making when they pursue any type of endeavors with digital assets or distributed ledger technologies or Web3 or any of the like. And AI even is really tipping the balance of the discussion here around specifically sustainability and economic and kind of the impact that the processing power really is what it comes down to, that it has on the environment as well. And there's actually I got a direct message from someone asking this type of question when it comes to, even if you're thinking about go back to the music industry example, or the example that I gave of verification of your identity or your background or certain aspects of your background. What's the cost to benefit there for all the processing power that's necessary to run and operate the nodes and the power of the blockchain? And so that's where we've seen this really big push, thankfully, to move and kind of analyze the distinction between whether a network is being run off of a proof of work or a proof of stake or other types of whatever similar types of technologies are available depending on the type of technology you're deploying, asking the question of are there ways to decrease the processing power? Are there ways to improve efficiencies and not have those types of impacts? Because especially from a corporate perspective, if you have these public facing, they're becoming less popular for political reasons in the US, but ESG commitments and other types of sustainability efforts, it kind of drives into that arm of your ethics of your company and your commitments that you made, or just general ethical considerations of how do you deploy these types of technologies without having disparate impact on the environment. And so AI is one in particular that is also raising similar concerns now too, just because of the vast processing power that's necessary to not only run the AI systems that are being developed and deployed, but also the frontier and foundational models that are being developed. As they're being developed, it's so costly, but it also takes a vast amount of processing power in connection with that. So ethical considerations also align around, especially in the AI space, around the rights and kind of all that goes into the data that goes into building the models and things like that. So it's not really an AI discussion, but it's similar concerns there, and the thoughts that come along with that. But then also with the crypto side of it and the blockchain side of it too, there are ethical considerations of if a company and a business decides to start transacting in that space, are they unknowingly involved in activities that they might not want to be involved in, or are they opening themselves up to liability? And this is probably where I think like Yitzi and probably has thoughts here, but are there other types of issues from a corporate perspective of setting up boundaries and backstops? Because like you explained earlier, once money or once a currency is transferred and a transaction happens, you can't really undo that unless you know who the other party is and can talk to them directly and reverse it just mechanically at that point. But actually going in and undoing things, that raises a whole host of problematic concerns of just on the management side of the wallets and the accounts that are created in this space.
Yeah, Yitzi, you want to comment on that?
I mean, I think just generally, like ethical considerations are not industry specific. Like one should always conduct themselves from a moral and ethical perspective. I think perhaps in blockchain, it becomes more of a prudent question because like you pointed out, you're often interacting with anonymous figures, and you're not may not be 100% sure as to whether or not you're facilitating something that you may not be comfortable with. So it's a balancing act.
I think we had a live question. I don't know if you still want to answer, if you still want to ask it, Ranganath. It seemed to be pretty.
I
Yeah,
No, I wanted to
there is
answer
also a
Betsy's
question.
question also from the chat.
Yeah, please go for it.
Yeah.
Betsy had a question, and
Yeah.
then we'll go to Ranganath to ask his question live. Go
Sorry,
for
I
it.
didn't. So Betsy asks, can you give an example of a product that can't be licensed? So it's a two-part answer. First of all, it's not always that it can't be licensed in that a license is unattainable, but sometimes it might be so costly that it would render the whole point of it to be pointless. I'll give like a classic example. Okay. First of all, whether you go down the regulatory arbitrage route or the regulatory compliance route, either way, it's very expensive. And I think this is one of the pain points in coming into and building a product within the blockchain sector is that like the first thing you have to do before anything almost is you know heavy legal and regulatory work, which is very expensive. So you may have a great product and you want to roll it out and you think you can make a lot of money, or you think you could raise a lot of money by issuing this token, but just issuing a token, which would yield a lot of money, will also cost you a lot of money to do in a compliant fashion. So regardless of which route you choose, it will likely be, not cheap. Okay. But even between not cheap and not cheaper, there are still cost considerations. For example, um, if your company engages in transferring funds, okay, so if you're an exchange or if you're allowing the performance of various transactions on your blockchain, for example, and you want to make your product accessible to consumers within the United States, then you would need to obtain a money transmitter license. And and if you're going to make your product available throughout the United States, and you need to obtain one within each state, and each state has its own requirements for obtaining that license. So even just that process of obtaining a legal opinion in each state and ensuring that your product um, is up to par with the requirements of that state regulator would be a very costly process. I want to just open up. I mentioned at the beginning that there were a lot of technical terms and kind of just open-ended things that I touched on and didn't kind of wrap up. I do want to recommend this like fantastic book that a friend of mine wrote. It's called the Crypto Legal Handbook. It's not just for lawyers. And the thing that I like about it the most is that it assumes that you know nothing about crypto, and it kind of gives you a bit of like a great entrance point and overview of how crypto developed, and then what the legal implications are. It obviously doesn't replace having a lawyer, but it will allow you to have a much more deeper understanding and probably a more informed conversation when you do chat with a lawyer. And one of the great things that he does is that he has an entire chapter where he goes over the different requirements for money transmitter licenses on a state-to-state basis and comparing them. But again, just that process is an extensive process. So even if you were comfortable coming into the United States and making your products available, if you wanted to obtain a license, state by state license, then that would be an expensive process. So sometimes it's just not cost efficient to obtain a license. Other times, your product is it might not have the proper controls within it to adhere to the requirements of the regulator. Okay, for example, once upon a time, people would go to obtain banking licenses in Lithuania because it was cheaper than obtaining banking licenses in Switzerland. But as the regulator in Lithuania understood that people were coming in and getting these like cheap unfettered banking licenses, they started to have more and more requirements through the diligence process, and it became more and more difficult to obtain. So it's as with anything, if you want to be licensed, you need to cross your T's and dot your I's, and yeah, hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think that was great. So let's go to Ranganath. Let me spotlight you.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, what's your question?
So you were talking about blockchain technology not being efficient enough, and it's not something like you need high computation cost to be able to run the blockchain, right? So we should see the technology as a means to implement in your own product solution. So it is not economical to write everything what we do digitally, right? And it is like something like you are talking and everybody wanted to listen. So, and if everybody keeps talking, then it's a chaos. Nobody will be able to listen to anyone, right? Blockchain technology is also similar. This is one part. When regulators are saying that we need to see who is transferring the money at what volumes, whatever it is, even if we give them all the data, they can't do anything. They can't go after the criminals, right? So they are fearful of using this technology by the criminals. As such, they don't want to uh, license it. Okay, so they wanted to see how it goes, and then they wanted to play the rules basically. So this is what I understood from the regulatory framework. I totally agree that regulatory frameworks often take time to give a product a particular license, but there is a reason for it as well. So imagine somebody handling your data and then it is working against you, not for you. Say, for example, you are happy to be provided with offers, discounts, or whatever it is, but you are not happy to share your data or be a guinea pig in some trials, say, for example, right? So this is where the regulatory frameworks comes in. So whether it is in finance or whether it is in pharmaceutical, regulatory regulatory bodies generally look into benefit of the customer. I totally agree. Again, in the business terms, anything which is time delayed, where you are not cost effective as well, it's again a loss to the business or loss to the product or service what you're trying to sell. But if we adhere these principles of blockchain, crypto, whatever it is, and apply them as a not as a complete technology, but as a concept into your data set, then you can do wonders similar to blockchain. So you can keep your computation power low. You can also implement that particular cryptographic, and you can also bring in the regulatory framework and then build the products in such a way that everybody is satisfied. So, and one more thing, there are plenty of technologies coming in which can compensate the cost for others. So my motto here, what I've done is I've created a fintech application wherein consumers can lend between themselves, and we would apply the limits just like credit card limits, which has a borrower limit and an investment limit. And if you wanted to have a higher limit, then you need to get regulatory approval or regulatory training exercise done, then you would get a higher limit. And money moves from one bank account to another bank account using open banking. So this way you are keeping your cost completely low, and we would give the consumers the power to request the loan at a predetermined interest rate. So the interest rates won't go from 18%, 24, 36. No, it is always at 12%, the maximum. So we would follow something like central bank base rate, banking rate to a maximum of 12%. And on top of it, I wanted to create something like crypto, wherein we would issue a token, which is similar to a deposit, you can say, but with a term of 1 month. It is up to you whether you wanted to do it for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or you wanted to do a repetition, like holding a share certificate. But we can do that with the crypto technology. So when it is crypto, it means it's a private key, what we are giving you, and we need that key back to be able to unlock the data. So now the founder has, or whatever, the company has a ownership saying that, okay, we are taking your money, utilizing that money, but here you go, we are giving you the money back, give us the token back, right? So this is what we can apply in the crypto world. Maybe it is not 100% right for everything, but we should have the data in such a way that we are able to do that at regional level or even at a consumer level, say for example. Now you see it unknowingly inside all the SOC2 compliant companies, wherein they would say, okay, we are storing your data, but it is cryptographically stored. Even if the company wanted to look at your key, private key, whatever it is, they can't do it because it is being coded with a certain key, right? So cryptography is already embedded into the system in such a way that even if you intended to do a malpractice, you can't do it.
Okay,
And I
yeah.
would just say, so everything that you were describing, I think, is exactly from being on the buyer side, typically representing of these types of technologies and implementations. That type of explanation and that type of architecture review, and even going back to what Issy is saying, the diligence that's done on the front end from a regulatory perspective, understanding all of that being laid out is typically what I am going to ask for, and ask for it and ask to see up front so that our business teams can evaluate it, and so that I can even evaluate it or have outside counsel that we work with evaluate it. So from a buyer perspective, from a licensor of these types of technologies, or even evaluating whether my clients want to join in on whatever network and maybe operate a node or contribute in some fashion, those types of considerations should all be really heavily laid out and put together in some package or something like that to alleviate concerns, and to at least acknowledge that as you've been building your technology, you've been thinking about all these different concerns and be able to address those in some way, whether it is, like you said, tying it to some type of standard, whether it's SOC or whatever. Being able to tie it to some standards is also helpful too.
Yitzi, did you want to comment on any of that?
No, good.
Okay, let's. I want to switch gears. Listen, I can't not talk about this subject. It's important. There was a few comments about it as well. I am a patent attorney as well, so I just want your overall impressions. Just on there are existing blockchain technologies that people utilize. There are people that are building their own kind of add-ons to existing blockchain technologies. Everybody and their mother is creating a token for sure. And Franklin brought up NFTs and non-fungible tokens and other sort of kind of digital art and currency. What's your general kind of take on the intellectual property issues kind of related to blockchain and crypto? I mean, yes, it's still, we're the wild, wild west. There are definitely, thousands of patents being filed for sure. Everybody trying to get their own little stake in it. That happens with any emerging technology. Everybody's trying to kind of grab something. What are you seeing, and kind of what's your take on intellectual property protection, enforcement, things like that?
Okay, so I'd say from a crypto perspective, it's no different than anything else. Intellectual property is intellectual property. I'll tell you where I found it got really interesting, and this is also kind of like where I met Franklin for the first time. And I'm an IP lawyer in the sense that I've done licensing agreements, but I've never done any of the trademark or patent registration or anything, so it never got into the technical nitty gritty. But I do very much love IP, and I find it to be a very engaging legal discipline. But I think the most interesting, the thing that got me most excited about intellectual property ever was the NFT. I don't know if to call it like phase. Like it wasn't a phase, but there was definitely a a period about a year and a half ago where NFTs were all the craze. And the coolest thing about NFTs, in my opinion, was the IP aspect, where you had all these. Okay, so for people who aren't familiar, what NFTs are, they're non-fungible tokens. So you have like two types of tokens. You have tokens that are fungible, like yeah, for example, what is fungible? Before I came across the concept NFT, I didn't even wasn't familiar with the word. But basically, the fungible is something that like that one and the other are, there's no difference. So $1 and another dollar, like there's no difference between $1 to the next. One Bitcoin to the next, there's no actual difference between they're one is not identifiable vis-a-vis another one. But non-fungible tokens are tokens that they have a unique token identifier, which is like a string of numbers that says this token is unlike any other token, and you can embed in the metadata associated with that token certain digital images. And those digital images are also non-fungible together with the unique token identifier. Okay, if that sounded like heebie-jeebie gibberish, I'm sorry. But it actually made for like a really cool. I still think NFTs are coming back, and they're going to be one of the coolest things within crypto. But basically, you had, I think, the most. They're certainly one of the earlier ones, but I think that they're also the most creative. You had these Bored Ape, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, it was called. You've probably seen them, even if you're not a crypto person, at like different, in on different commercial wear. I'm gonna just show you on my wall. I have one here. You see these like ape monkey things. So there were 10,000 computer generated versions of apes, and each one had these different features: hats, shirts, whatever other kind of different things. And typically when you buy a piece of art, so you have the rights to hang that art up on the wall and maybe sell it. And here, but you don't have the commercial rights. Like if I buy the Mona Lisa, I can't make Mona Lisa t-shirts and sell them and commercialize them. But what this Bored Ape Yacht Club did was they said, we're going to actually give you, commercial rights to the art that you're buying. So you're buying this ape, and he's yours. You could do whatever you want with him. You could make him the mascot of a football team, or of a chain of pizza stores, or coffee. And people got really cool and creative with the branding. They bought apes because they took off so quickly from a bunch of different reasons. They gain like unique brand equity without even being associated with a brand. And then any brand that associated themselves with them also had immediate equity to a certain extent. So people really did launch like coffee lines and hamburger joints and all different kinds of things. I personally use mine to market my law firm. These are my business cards, and it's like
That's awesome.
I made my own like lawyer ape with a Bitcoin tie, and I think that that ability to take IP and get creative with it, and kind of like give it over to the community. There's one of the coolest features of NFTs specifically. I mean, it's crypto generally, but NFTs specifically is the community aspect. You have all these people that come together and they buy a token or a bunch of non-fungible tokens, and they get really excited about it. And the power of the community is really quite strong. Another thing that we didn't touch on, and it's a very important and integral part of blockchain, is the decentralized aspect of it. You have people come in and they decide, okay, I want to launch a project. Typically, when you go and you open up a company, you are the shareholders of the company. The IP is yours. The revenues are yours. In blockchain, it's often the opposite. People come in and they say, okay, we want to launch a protocol. If your protocol is decentralized, meaning it's not sitting on a certain server, it's kind of like out there in the world, around a bunch of nodes, and the governance around the token and what's done with the money in the treasury and what future things are built and what money is paid out to who and where the revenues go to is determined by the token holders. Then the notion of shareholders and directors becomes less relevant. And so what people started setting up was what's called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. They said, okay, this token is going to be governed by a DAO. Okay, it's going to be governed by the protocol itself, where people who hold a certain amount of tokens, or put their tokens in staking, which is kind of like, which means that they're holding their tokens and they're not spending them, and it's like it deposited in a smart contract, then they're going to be able to put forth proposals and vote on those proposals, and ultimately decide where the company is going. And so you had people who would come and they would launch these projects. They'd be the face of the project. They'd be the driving force behind it. But they would always say, you know, in 2 or 3 years time, or after X and Y and Z occurs, I'm out of the picture, and there's full governance in the hands of the community. And so you really see in blockchain the power of community. And so the IP also becomes a question of where is it and who does it belong to, and can you actually, like, if the DAO is the one who owns the IP, and the DAO is initially, you know, a foundation that was established in Panama or Cayman, as kind of like a wrapper, what we call a wrapper for the foundation, as a wrapper for the DAO. But once the DAO gets to a point of like sufficient decentralization, where governance is like fully in the hands of the community, then the foundation is disbanded and no longer exists, and all you have is this like air. Okay, you have like there is no company. So the IP belongs to the community, and they could decide what happens to it based on governance, and the revenues from it go into the treasury, and the use of that is determined by governance. So who owns the IP? Who's responsible for the IP? And most importantly, who has the power to sue for infringement? And there were some really, really, really interesting cases that came up within the context of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, because you had this like troll on Twitter, this guy Ryder Rips, who's like a creator artist of sorts, and he really started ripping into the community, trying all different kinds of things, kind of like challenging the IP. He just kind of, you know, they're similar to, I can't remember who it was. Somebody said that they're a copyleft advocate. So I guess he was kind of like a copyleft advocate, and there's a lot of people in that camp where they say, I don't need to buy an NFT. I'll just right click save as, right? I'm just gonna like right click on the image that you bought for $10 million and you claim to be the owner of. I'm gonna save as, and I'm gonna make it my profile picture now, and you can't do anything about it. And this guy was like all up in their faces, like, you know, I have the same one that you have, and it's mine just as much as it's yours. And then when Yuga Labs, the company that actually launched the protocol, launched the token collection, tried to claim the IP and to go after him for infringement, he turned around and said, no, you actually don't, you can't enforce the IP here, because you don't you retained ownership of the logo Bored Ape Yacht Club, but the actual images themselves are not yours. You gave over those commercial rights to the NFT holders. Each individual holder could perhaps exercise those rights with vis-a-vis his own NFT, his own image, but not the collection as a whole. And so a lot of really, really interesting questions came out and continue to come out of the generative art world. But Franklin knows a whole lot about this kind of stuff, and I'm sure he could tell you more about it. He's the IP expert.
Yeah, Franklin, you just opened up
I
a
was
whole
going up
can
into
of
his
worms.
territory. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
for
tend to do that.
sure.
I told you I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
Franklin, I know you have comments. Please on this. This is because I think this idea of like decentralization versus intellectual property, which is constitutional law, like it's fighting each other. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. What I just said. I actually was just reading this morning, 2 days ago, going back to like what we've been discussing all along, which is unpacking the various threads of liability that can come from engaging in this space. In the US, it looks like I think it was back in 2022. There was a lawsuit that was filed against a whole host of people, including Yuga Labs and people like Justin Bieber and a lot of celebrities for their involvement in this type of environment and the NFT space generally. And so I think that the latest Madonna was also included. I think the latest filing, I haven't really read through it all, but I think the judge is not going to let them out of it because it was like, I think it raised securities questions, raised a lot of these different questions around it. So even now, even today, we are still seeing the aftermath of those early days of the NFT craze. And those are the types of things to keep in mind. Going back to NFTs in particular, and how they're structured, I have always taken the position that if it's like an NFT collection, like the Bored Apes or like others, I have a hard time really grappling with the copyrightability of some of those, because essentially what's being done is, well, sorry, backing up, foundationally for copyright law purposes, at least in the US, and it's recognized similarly across different jurisdictions around the world, a requirement to have a claim of copyright ownership over a work is that it's human authored. So the more you start adding in non-human elements to the creative process, the further you get away from being able to claim that you are the owner of the work. So with NFT collections in particular, which if you're not familiar with that, NFT collections are traditionally and popularly, they were collections of like 10,000 or so unique artworks. So like the Bored Apes are a great example of that, where basically an artist or somebody creates a base caricature of some kind, and then software is used to compile and create variations of outfits, hair color, eye, accessories, all that kind of fun stuff, backgrounds, and then different tools can be used and applied to impact the statistical nature of certain unique features and make them rarer, things like that. And so it really kind of begs the question of, well, what is being transferred and what is what's being created? Is that tipping the line over into arguments that there's not human creation, but rather maybe human curation, human arrangement of those works? And so generative AI entered the space around the same time, like a year or two after NFTs, and have raised even more concerns around that, because with Gen AI, and I can really only speak to US copyright law, but in the US, the Copyright Office has looked at it and said they just really have a hard time with the black box nature of tools like Midjourney and Stability, where the output typically will involve 4 or 5 different images that somebody selects from. And they've even looked at cases where there's like prompting of 500 different prompts that are used, and refinements of an output in Photoshop, and taking it to the next step. So they've looked at all of that, and still there's just this risk when it comes to dealing in the trade of NFTs that are based in part on either non-human compilation of pre-existing digital assets like Bored Apes and all that, or if it is truly just generative AI outputs that are being modified in some way, or just slop is the new term for that, being thrown around and sold or traded. So there's a lot to unpack with all that, but that's the general gist of it. But all of that is still powered by blockchain, ties in with crypto, and also gets into the digital aspect of IP rights that come along with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Franklin. Just in the interest of time, I know there are probably 1 or 2 other questions, but please reach out. Yitzi and Franklin, if you haven't, I think Yitzi has. Franklin, if you can share your information or your LinkedIn, I think you might have also. Please reach out to Yitzi and Franklin directly if you have any further questions. I want to give Yitzi and Franklin some kind of final thoughts here. We'll start with Yitzi. Maybe you can just kind of give us your thought. There's a lot here. I think you said it perfectly. An hour is not enough, and we're at 1:15, and that's not enough. And so just your final thoughts on like where this industry is going, how you can help, trends, things to watch out for. And Franklin, the same question for you after Yitzi, if you can.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I always enjoy these kind of conversations, especially when you bring on such a bunch of brilliant minds. So thank you for including me. I appreciate it. And thank you all for coming and listening. Where is this going? I'm incredibly bullish on technology in general, specifically emerging technologies. I love AI. I'm fearful of it, but I love it. I think we need to continue to strive to understand these technologies and see how they can better us, and not in other words, not how they're better than us, but how could they help us be better at what we do, and how we could utilize them to be more efficient and focus our energies elsewhere. I love blockchain as a technology. I love NFTs as a technology. While I didn't finish my disclaimer in that a year and a half ago, when there was this really, really fun NFT hype, but also like a whole bunch of scams and people just like, money grabbing. But I actually think that there's so much that was there that was real, like the fun, the community aspect, the technology itself. I think that we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. Obviously this is not financial advice, not legal advice, but I think Bitcoin as an asset is a very interesting asset to watch. I wouldn't put all my money on it, but I would certainly have some Bitcoin. Um, um, yeah, how could I help? If you're looking to build in this space and you want to do that in a responsible manner, I mean, that's kind of our motto, build responsibly. If you're already in this industry and you're going to any of the, large industry conferences, I'll be in Singapore in September at Token 2049. You're welcome to come and visit us, or just reach out. I set my details in the group. I'm happy to work with you. And also, if you're interested generally in emerging tech, please tune into my podcast, Beyond the Code, and you can listen to Franklin and many others. And thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Yitzi. By the way, check out Jean's question also. Maybe you can respond to her directly. I think she needs some help there too. Franklin, please, you.
Yeah, so just very quickly, I don't take clients. I work, like I said, full time already, and I have, especially if they're healthcare related, like Gene, I'm not going to touch that because I can't deal with conflicts around all that. And especially FDA stuff is definitely intense to say the least. So, but yeah, I'm happy to still connect with people and follow each other and see what's going on in the space. But for me, I'm most excited and looking forward to the possibilities with Web3. And I know that Web3 was a term thrown around, the metaverse, all that kind of stuff, overutilized, oversaturated. But I still believe in the foundational elements of federated networks, the future of interoperability and data portability, all of that is coming and is being slowly adopted from an open source technology perspective, open protocol perspective, much in the same way that we have email as an open protocol. Everyone communicates via email. Having those types of standards and protocols starting to get established is exciting. I also think from a creator economy law perspective, from a creator economy perspective, it's exciting to think about deplatforming and not having centralized platforms, whether it's a monopoly or duopoly or however you view it, that taking that power away and having additional means of impacting how our content and how we engage with each other. That's gonna, in the digital space, and how our content is shared is going to be critical. So I'm excited about that going forward, because all of that is emerging technology, blockchain related initiatives as well. But thank you all for having me. Muted.
Yeah, thank you, Franklin. Thank you for that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this. I think it begs for a part 2, so I might be back in touch with you again. We might want to, maybe we'll be a little bit more focused because there's just so many topics to talk about. But thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and thank you for educating and empowering everyone. We will be back the last Thursday of September. We are delving into some of the kind of immigration issues that affect startups. A lot of startups in this country and abroad are from other countries. They're moving here. They're trying to do business here, trying to navigate visas. It's a bunch of it's a lot. And so we have some great immigration attorneys and accountants who will be on that panel as well. So please look out for that. As you know, this will be recorded. We will share some key takeaways and the video next week. And please, I encourage you all to be in touch with our speakers so that they can so that they can further share their knowledge with you. Everyone, thank you. I really appreciate you coming. And for those who are watching, thank you for watching. Yitzi and Franklin, everybody have a good rest of the week. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
David.
Bye-bye.